to the AFSA webinar, Fire and Rescue Service. Today is really, really important. It's been our first day of our conference in Merseyside, but we've gone through a absolutely awful period of where equality, diversity has had a spotlight put on it. Through COVID-19, we've seen the disparity of impact on our vulnerable communities. We've seen during the George Floyd death, the Black Lives Matter movement, the issues really, really profiling on particularly Black communities. AFSA's done its bit in highlighting the key issues, in continuing to stay engaged with you all, and we thank you for continuing to engage with AFSA. The weekly newsletter I pointed to, it's only that standard because you offer us information to put on there. So our first guest speaker is Jill Tofley, Chief Executive of the Firefighters Charity, and Jill has taken our charity from strength to strength. It's a tremendous charity doing great work across a whole range of things. And I'm not going to take too much of her time, but I do want to highlight the lessons I learned about charity. People do not often know that the charity is there for you as employees, for support staff, for uniform staff, and it does a lot more work than just around physical injuries. It does a lot around mental health as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jill to you. Jill, you want to come in?
I will. Yeah, thank you very much, Jack, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Really short presentation. I was asked to talk about health and wellbeing, obviously, and standard setting. I was going to talk to you about the size of the problem in the Fire and Rescue Service, a little bit about the work I'm doing with the NFCC Health and Wellbeing Board, and then, as you would expect, just talk a little bit about the support available both within your services and at the charity. Size of the problem. It's huge. These figures that you can see on the slide are 18-19 figures pre-COVID. We know that although it's not directly associated with COVID, the increase in mental health within the service, mental health challenges has increased quite substantially. But even on those 18-19 figures, we've got over 371,000 days lost per year, which is effectively 9 days per employee per annum across the sector. Is still balanced around a higher percentage of being musculoskeletal rather than mental health. But I do think that mental health is creeping up, and that synergy between mental health, physical health is a real issue in terms of how we actually manage health. And one of the strong ethoses within the charities that we actually don't separate the two. It's around focusing on mental or physical, but actually uniting the whole thing together. So it is a huge problem, but the work that I've been doing with the NFCC Health and Wellbeing Board, I sit on the NFCC Health and Wellbeing Board, and there is a health and wellbeing strategy, which I don't know how much of this you've actually seen, but there is an aspiration with the Health and Wellbeing Board that by 2022, every member of the service feels that their wellbeing is actively supported by their service throughout their career. There is a supportive health and wellbeing culture embedded in the services. Prevention of illness and the paramount of health and wellbeing is paramount, and the promotion of health and wellbeing is paramount, and that all staff have early access to appropriate intervention. There is no doubt there is a real shift towards prevention and supporting people as they work through their career. And you may also be aware, the NFCC has also signed up to the Healthy Ageing Consensus Statement. And the first statement within that consensus statement is about putting prevention first. So this is really about working with our services to stop some of the challenges that are actually happening. And that's absolutely music to my ears in terms of actually how we can move forward. Although of course there will always be those situations where we need to put in therapeutic support, to respond to challenges and to help people recover. So the outcomes of this strategy are, the aspirations are, is that they're going to that we will deliver evidence-based guidance and tools that promote, prevent, and detect and treat workplace health issues. So the proposal is that we will be developing evidence-based guidance around what the evidence suggests is a good way of supporting the workforce through the issues around both in terms of the impact of being within the fire and rescue service, but also those other issues. So for me, this isn't, none of this is rocket science. This is what good employers should actually be doing and should always have been in place in the first place. And I'm sure in terms of the CIPD and a whole range of other organisations around actually what good employers or good employment should actually look like. But what we're proposing to do, and for my sins, I have, because of the Health and Wellbeing Board, have been identified as the sector lead for putting this together in terms of mental health. And I'm working with Dr. Rowena Hill at Nottingham Trent in terms of putting together the evidence for how this will actually work. But we're focusing on supporting mental health, but we're also focusing on the professional journey with mental health. Now, this particular picture is very much focused on operational firefighters, but it has relevance for anybody within the fire and rescue service. But it's about looking, it's about looking at the whole trajectory of a journey through your life within the fire and rescue service. So it's actually starting from pre-recruitment. So actually, I can just. No, I think you'll probably find it's a bit blurred. I'm sorry. We start at a sort of pre-recruitment level. It's about understanding what the career is. If you move into the recruitment phase, it's about understanding the role demands and the impact upon self of what it means to be within the fire and rescue service. As you move through, it's about educating the family and understanding the holistic needs and the holistic process around health and wellbeing. So that link, that integration between physical and social health as well as mental health. It takes all the way through from pre-recruitment to that last phase on there, which is around retirement and understanding how life-changing that is actually in terms of there's a whole career that's gone forward in terms of those sort of 25, 30 years, maybe even 35 years of being within the fire and rescue service, and then that massive transition for stepping out of the service and what that really means. This whole process, this whole philosophy that we're actually looking at is much more around actually understanding life transitions as we go through the workforce. But it's not just about as you're working. There's an element also around external threats, because as we live life, we sadly go through a lot of different changes, not always happy. But if you think about some of the external threats in things of the impact of parenthood, injury, other stressors, different life events, menopause, occupational change, a whole range of different things that we are dealing with as people, which we then take to our working life. And then you have within the fire and rescue service those other elements of working life as well that you have to try and get some synergy with and actually put into context and be able to move forward and be successful. There is always as well within this dealing with the event, whatever that event might be, and that could be a large event, it could be a small event, it could be an event which is associated with work, it could be an event which is associated with home, but it is still something which is a threat, which something has to be managed. So the essence of what we're trying to produce is to look through the evidence. There's a lot of desk-based research having to go on, to look through the evidence about what are the most appropriate things that should be put in place at each of these stages through the working life. It's a little bit like the military model in that if you reflect on what happens to people through the military services, there are mandatory support mechanisms which actually go in place at different levels through each of the elements of sort of stages of becoming a raw recruit to becoming a colonel, but recognizing that there is a real difference in terms of how you move through that career. I mean there is. If you imagine just as an operational firefighter, one day you're part of the watch, the next day you might be responsible for the watch. Who helps you during those transitions? Who helps you get your head around that element and keep you safe as well as keeping them safe? So that's the work that we're pressing on with. We are also working with Justin Johnson, who is leading on the physical side of it, because the board actually recognised the whole thing has to come together. And of course, from my perspective on this, there's also the social health elements, because many of the beneficiaries that we work with, their mental health challenges are often related to home and often related to things like finance, relationships, a whole range of different things, those other external factors that I was talking about. Okay. So just finally, just to remind you about the support that's available. All fire and rescue services have organisational support, have organisational provision. They at least have an employee assistance programme. And I am aware that some employee assistance programs are not as good as others. I think if you're having challenges with what's being provided internally, then you need to raise those challenges internally. But there is a lot of work going on to actually recognise that the strength of the workforce is governed by how healthy and how well that workforce is feeling. And that leads very much into the whole sort of leadership programme as well. I have put on there the 0800 number for the firefighters charity. If you dial that number, you will get straight through to a practitioner who will support you and will have a conversation with you, identify what your problems are, and actually direct you to the most appropriate support. I've also put the website number up on there. But the one thing I will leave you with is the blue light text number at the bottom, that if you have anybody or you are feeling at a critical stage in your mental health support, you actually text blue light to 85258 and you will get directly through to some individual clinical support. And that was a really quick run through, but I think that's sort of where we are.
Cheers, Jill. Thank you. My comments are: health and well-being isn't expensive. It is a cost-effective method of ensuring your staff that you recruit, the valuable resource that you have. 80% of your budget is spent on staff, whether they be operational or support staff. If you don't look after them, then they will be a very expensive resource, and you need to ensure that well-being is at the forefront of everything that you do. Well-being should not really be a charitable thing that we do, but it just, the way that the structures have been set up, the fire service, that the firefighters charity has taken that mantle, and firefighters and fire service staff have taken it upon themselves to raise tremendous amounts of money for the charity. I still think it's a corporate and core responsibility of organisations, and it's pleasing to see NFCC has got it as a corporate and cornerstone policy, which I have posted up on the website in the chat box. It is there if you Google it. I'm sure we can bring somebody from NFCC to talk about the strategy at some time in the future. The benefits are very, very clear. I don't need to go into the benefits of a well-being strategy. But let me give you my experience in my current role as a mental health trust. We have got 6 staff that focus on well-being in my organisation. And since COVID-19, nothing has been higher on our agenda than the well-being of our staff. You would imagine in this COVID-19 period that our sickness rates would be up, our retention rates would be worse, our vacancy rates would be worse. Nothing could be further from the truth. Because we focus on our staff, I will bring our wellbeing staff to a future conference call if you wish. They'll tell you our vacancies have never been lower. Our sickness rates have never been lower. Our staff survey has never been better. Why is that? It's because we focus as a leadership team on their well-being. People that were self-isolating, we made sure that every one of them received a phone call on a regular basis to see how they were. Every week, we have taken calls from staff. 250 staff a week have been calling in to speak to the chief exec himself. Now, all that's going to help and support staff, because if they've got questions that they can't get answered by the government, then at least we can answer them honestly as leaders. And I think there's a lot more we can do in the fire service to learn from the NHS, but the NHS can learn from Jill and the work of the firefighters charity, because I got nothing like it, Jill.